Whenever you jump out of the door, it's not just adrenaline, it's not just fear, it's not just excitement, it's what's called sensory overload.
What kind of person would jump out of a plane streaking across the sky at more than 10,000 feet, hurling their body toward the earth at 120 miles an hour? For fun. Meet Andy Judy. He has a serious need for speed.
Andy was a skydiver. He was one.
Don Bick runs a school in western Pennsylvania where Andy often skydives.
He wasn't just someone that came to my drop zone to experience something that the crazy skydivers did. He was one of us and a good friend.
It's Labor Day weekend, 2002. Andy decides to go skydiving with his dad, Tim, and a few friends.
It was a really hot day. I remember we were kind of joking around about jumping out and landing in somebody's swimming pool.
The day couldn't be going any better. Andy, his dad, and friends have all made 2 successful jumps. And for their third run, they decide to try something a little different. They'll do a 4-way jump, locking arms and all leaving the plane together.
And I was the one giving the count so we could leave together. To do that, I had one foot on the step, and then my right foot was hanging free.
The plane races up to 11,000 feet and levels off above the jump zone.
As I gave the count, we all pushed off, and my left foot basically remained in place on the step, and my head swung backwards towards the ground. Everything was upside down.
A piece of Andy's jumpsuit gets snagged on the step, on a piece of metal. Fear doesn't set in just yet, but his survival instinct does.
I thought that I could climb back up, but I was in a 100-mile-per-hour wind blast. My parachute weighed 35 pounds. I didn't have any leverage.
The only person left in the plane is the pilot, and he can't leave the controls. As Andy dangles 11,000 feet up with no one to help him, his dad and friends land safely on the ground, where Don Bick is working desperately to rescue his friend.
We knew that the odds of someone surviving what Andy was going through were possibly not good.
But Don isn't giving up hope yet.
It just wasn't an option for Andy to perish. That wasn't going to happen.
He calls Andy's dad into his office to run through the rescue options.
We talked about different angles of attack of the aircraft, turning it in different directions to see if we could dislodge Andy. We did try that.
But it doesn't work. Andy still hangs under the plane, frantically trying to save himself from death high above the earth.
There was one time I remember where I actually got my fingertips onto the step, but I immediately slipped off. I kept trying to climb back up.
With each failed attempt, Andy gets more and more discouraged.
As time progressed, that's when the sense of hopelessness or the sense of this isn't going to work, I'm not going to get out of the situation, that's when the fear intensified.
By now, Andy has been hanging upside down for an unbelievable 40 minutes, and time is not on his side.
The jumpsuit somehow began to constrict around my upper leg. I can't think of another point in my life where I've experienced more pain, and I remember having thoughts of, am I going to lose my leg?
On the ground, Don and Andy's dad, Tim, are still trying to figure out the best plan to get Andy down safely.
The plane was going to land. The pilot was going to have to put it down. We were running out of fuel, and it was time to make the serious decision.
Don knows what has to happen. He knows it could mean death for his friend, but he makes the most difficult decision of his life.
At that point, I brought Tim back into the office and explained to him that I was going to land the aircraft with his son underneath it. And he pretty much said, "No, you're not." And after a bit of talking between the both of us, it was a teary moment. But we decided that had to happen.
Andy doesn't know anything about this plan, but he does sense that an end, good or bad, has to be near, and prepares himself.
I guess whenever you're faced with the potential of death for that long of a time, for 45 minutes, I mean, you kind of give yourself up to that possibility.
Preparations are made to bring the plane down. A rescue team, EMTs, fire department, and fellow skydivers assemble on that landing strip. But the plan isn't to land on the runway. The pilot plans to touch down on a narrow strip next to the hard pavement.
I organized having a stretch of grass cleaned meticulously. We lined people up to pick up anything that might possibly harm Andy striking the ground. And then we called the pilot and asked him to bring him in.
As the plane approaches, Don turns to Andy's dad.
We embraced. It was very heartfelt. We talked about the fact that we were confident that Andy was going to be okay, both of us knowing that that probably wasn't going to be the case.
The men can't communicate with Andy, but he begins to understand the plan.
The ground was coming up at me, so I realized that we were going to land. I was honestly more exhausted emotionally, physically, mentally than I'd ever been in my life, and I was ready to deal with whatever the consequences were.
I said to the pilot, make this the shortest and softest landing of your life.
Just before impact, Andy shows enormous strength, tucking his legs up, contorting himself into a fetal position, and bracing for the worst.
And then he struck the ground. That's when you quit breathing. Cloud of dust, and then we all rushed the aircraft. Even though I was running flat out to see Andy after the plane touched down, I was apprehensive about getting there. I didn't think anybody could survive that.
But as Don and Andy's dad reached the now-stopped plane, against all odds,
I opened my eyes, and my first words to them is, God, I'm lucky.
Yeah, he was. It was incredible.
Andy's rushed to the hospital, and miraculously, doctors find no major injuries. He's released and walks out with only minor scrapes and bruises. One lucky guy indeed. And amazingly, he's back skydiving just 3 weeks later.
People always say live every day.